toll as Israel faces pressure to delay a ground invasion. Israel said it has struck more than 400 targets in the past 24 hours after hitting more than 320 a day earlier in some of the most intense aerial attacks on Gaza in recent days. A United Nations Security Council meeting on the Israel-Gaza war began today with the Secretary General of the United Nations saying in an address that it was important to recognize that the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum and that Palestinians had been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. The grievances of the Palestinian people, according to the UN Secretary General, cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, he said, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The Biden administration is concerned that Israel lacks achievable military objectives in Gaza and that the Israel Defense Forces are not yet ready to launch a ground invasion with a plan that can work. Representative Tom Emmer of Minnesota, the number 3 House Republican, dropped his bid for Speaker today, hours after securing his divided party's nomination, after a swift backlash from the right, including former President Donald J. Trump, who left Emmer's candidacy in shambles. Emmer's abrupt exit signaled that Republicans were as far as ever from breaking a deadlock that has left Congress leaderless and paralyzed for 3 weeks. Jenna Ellis, a pro-Trump lawyer who amplified former President Donald Trump's baseless claims of election fraud as part of what she called a legal elite strike force team, pled guilty today as part of a deal with prosecutors in Georgia. During a public hearing this morning in Atlanta, Ellis pled guilty to a charge of aiding and abetting false statements and writings. She is the 4th defendant to plead guilty in the Georgia case, which Trump and 18 others have been charged under Georgia's RICO statute with conspiring to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The wars in Israel and Ukraine have fueled an explosion in videos online showcasing the horrors of modern war, bringing killings and cruelty to a global audience of viewers who are unprepared or too willing to watch. The supply of new graphic videos has boomed as fighters use cell phones and GoPro cameras to record or live stream footage from a point-blank perspective, either for purposes of military strategy or propaganda. The United Auto Union workers expanded its strike against Detroit's Big Three for the second consecutive day as members at a major General Motors manufacturing plant walked off the job. The union said 5,000 employees from the Arlington assembly plant in Texas are now on strike. All of GM's full-size internal combustion SUVs are worked on at that facility, including the Chevrolet Tahoe and Suburban, UMC Yukon and Yukon XL, as well as the Cadillac Escalade and Escalade V. And Michael Cohen, once Donald Trump's lawyer fixer, has become his nemesis. And shortly after taking the witness stand today, he cast the former president as a criminal and a cheat. Trump is on trial in the civil fraud case in Manhattan, was seated just a couple of feet away, and we could see him in photographs scoffing at the testimony and shaking his head in anger as his former fixer and lawyer continued to give damning testimony that the prosecution is using to win its $250 million civil fraud case against the former president. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I'm joined by 2 brilliant contributors, Dr. Kerry Mitchell-Brown, who's the Senior Vice President of Finance Operations and Senior Strategic Advisor for Race Forward. Also in this hour, I am joined by Dr. Raja Rahim, she is a scholar and historian of U.S. and African American history at Appalachian State College. And in hour two, you know what we do. We go deep and we dig behind the headlines, and we bring you those stories that have big impact, that have a tremendous impact in some cases on the lives of everyday people. And today we're talking about environmental justice. As industrial plants have overtaken historic Black communities and burdened neighborhoods with toxic air pollution, environmental advocates and residents of many states, including Louisiana, and those advocates who've been working on the Louisiana Chemical Corridor have spent decades calling for change. So when the country's top environmental regulator opened a high-profile civil rights investigation into Louisiana's Department of Environmental Quality last year, it felt like a watershed moment for those environmental justice advocates. Now, after pledging to clean up what's referred to as Cancer Alley in Louisiana, and this is a nickname that's been given for a highly industrialized 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, after the EPA, Biden's EPA, pledged to clean up Cancer Alley, issued a letter in October of last year detailing preliminary evidence of racial discrimination and noncompliance by the state. Advocates, as you can imagine, were ecstatic. They felt like they had finally won a victory, that finally the EPA was listening to their claims of discrimination and literally air poisoning of the Black community in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Now, given the EPA's preliminary findings of racial discrimination, today we are asking why. Why did the EPA then abruptly close its investigation into the Louisiana's Air Quality Department and the state of Louisiana? Why did the EPA, the National Environmental Protection Agency, why did it abruptly close its investigation? And what does this mean for Black folks living in Baton Rouge and New Orleans? We're going to talk in hour two to some of those advocates, someone who actually lives in that 85-mile stretch referred to as Cancer Alley. Talk about the impact of living in that poisonous community, what it has done, the disease and illnesses that it has caused to Black people, and what are advocates in this state now doing that the Biden administration's EPA has closed its racial discrimination claim against the state of Louisiana. So make sure you stick around for hour two as we talk about environmental justice and how the Biden administration is addressing issues of states like Louisiana. But before I bring on my guest, here's what I'm thinking about in real time, talking about investigations and lawsuits. A coalition of 41 states, and including the District of Columbia, they are filing lawsuits. And this time, not against Donald Trump, who's been in a lot of litigation lately, but this time these lawsuits are against the social media platform formerly known as Facebook, now known as Meta. Yes, these lawsuits filed by these states claim that Meta has intentionally built its product with addictive features that harm young users of both Facebook and Instagram. These lawsuits that have been filed in both federal and state courts across the country say that Meta misled the public about the dangers of its platforms for young people. The states also allege that Meta knowingly marketed its products to users under the age of 13, who are technically barred from the platform by both Meta's policies and federal law. These lawsuits are seeking to force Meta, Facebook, Instagram to change many of its product features that they say pose dangers to young users. Now, these lawsuits are significant because we've seen school districts over the last couple of years file pretty similar lawsuits against big social media companies saying, you social media companies are targeting young people. And by doing so, you are creating a mental health crisis amongst young people, the likes of which we have not seen. So now having these attorney generals, and what's so significant about these lawsuits, they're not being filed just by states that are, controlled by Republican governors or that have Republican attorney generals. These lawsuits are being filed by some of the reddest states in the nation, as well as blue states like Massachusetts. The first African-American attorney general for the state of Massachusetts is leading one of these lawsuits against Meta. So we have this bipartisan effort by states. And these states say these lawsuits are big and that they are pledging huge sums of money, that they are investing heavily in this litigation. And these attorney generals are calling these lawsuits comparable to those that we saw filed against big tobacco companies, similar to the big opioid lawsuits that we have seen filed. And what we know from those big tobacco and opioid lawsuits is that often they cause companies, in some cases, pharmaceutical companies, to go bankrupt, to file bankruptcy, big tobacco companies to make major changes in its product line. So we're going to watch very carefully to see what happens with these lawsuits being filed against Meta by these states. Because when you think about a company like Meta, all of its resources, its vast resources, not likely that school districts, definitely not individual plaintiffs, can go up against Meta. But you get 41 states, the attorney generals from 41 states, with all of the litigation and resources that these states have. I think we're going to see some major changes happen to the way Facebook rolls out products, Instagram as well, and the way they engage with young people. Super excited about these lawsuits. I love social media. I love the platforms. Obviously, they have democratized information in a lot of ways, but we also know these social media platforms are addictive and that they can be harmful and they can impact the mental health of young people. And as a civil rights attorney that knows how big impact litigation can change how companies do business and can make products safer, I'm excited about this lawsuit because I think it's going to go a long way in making social media platforms safer, not do away with them, but make them safer for young people. And this is a warning to TikTok and others. You better watch these lawsuits closely, because if these states have any degree of success, they are going to come for these other platforms as well. So we're going to keep a close eye on what happens in these lawsuits. When we come forward, our expert contributors here to help us break down today's trending news right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Don't touch that dial.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Good Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
We are back, and in this hour, we are joined by Dr. Kerry Mitchell-Brown. She is a senior vice president at Race Forward, and Dr. Raja Rahim. She is a scholar and historian of U.S. and African-American history at Appalachian State. And in hour two, we are talking about environmental justice and asking, why did the EPA abruptly drop a civil rights investigation into the state of Louisiana after a preliminary finding of discrimination as it relates to this 85-mile stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, referred to as Cancer Alley. So make sure you stick around for hour two. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell-Brown, and welcome, Dr. Rahim. Busy news day today. Obviously, lots going on with the Israeli-Gaza war, as well as in the U.S. Congress. Tom Emmer from Minnesota, who was elected in a closed-door meeting by Republicans to be the Speaker nominee, again, abruptly ends his efforts to be Speaker after a tremendous backlash from the I'll call the MAGA part of the Republican Party, in this case, led by Donald Trump. Dr. Mitchell-Brown, what do you make of this Republican Party that does not seem capable of governing, capable of electing a leader for its party, and has left the country now for almost 30 days without a Speaker of the House, therefore crippling the House's ability to do the people's business?
Yeah, this represents where the Republicans are struggling to find their center, right? They are not, I mean, Tom Emmer was going to have some difficulty convincing the far-right Republicans for their vote. And we see it play out in real time, like right before our eyes. Was it an hour? It was announced, and then an hour and a half later, it was like overturned, right? And so, I mean, it really impacts everyone. Like elected officials cannot do the job that they're hired to do. And this, again, is just the after effects of a Trump administration and Republican Party really struggling to get things together.
Yeah, we hear a lot, Dr. Rahim, about the Republican Party being, more interested in disruption, more interested in some of its members getting airtime on television, getting their 15 minutes of fame on Fox News and other conservative media outlets. And, many of those in the Republican Party, say those are baseless attacks. But after watching what happened today, and as Dr. Mitchell-Brown said, literally, I got one alert on my phone that Tom Emmer was the Republican Speaker nominee. And before I could even read that article, I got yet another alert on my phone saying that he had stepped down. And he was considered, a unifier of sort. He obviously was not a MAGA Republican, although they said he made, frantic calls to Donald Trump, or Donald Trump said he made frantic calls to him, kissing up to him as he knew he was likely to get the vote to be the nominee. But that wasn't enough. He actually voted to certify the election for Joe Biden. He voted to keep the government open. And it seems like if you do either of those things, you are automatically disqualified by the right to be the speaker. So it begs the question as to who in the Republican Party, Dr. Rahim, could possibly even be the speaker.
At this point, they're just running through all that they have to offer us, right? And all that they have to offer themselves as a party. And so we're pretty much just sitting back waiting for them to make the decisions behind closed doors, to come to an agreement amongst themselves so they can actually do their job for the people who elected them and for all of the United States citizens and residents, right, who live here and are depending on them to make decisions for our well-being. But when it comes down to the Republican Party, I mean, at this particular point, we're going through the names. And as you already stated, if you did not support Trump or you do not seem to align with the MAGA side of the Republican Party, you are not going to be speaker. But what is really interesting is at this point, who really wants the job? And why would you want that job? Right? Because at the end of the day, there will be concessions that need to be made. And I'm not understanding why any Republican will want to, at this point, step in, knowing that even though Donald Trump does not get a vote, he seems to have a lot of say and sway over what is happening there. And so therefore, if you're not his friend and not willing to go down in the flames that are currently happening, then hey, just sit back. And for the rest of us who are really understanding that this has nothing to do with us and this is their drama that is just happening to be affecting all of us to a certain extent. But this is a Republican issue and they really need to come to the table, make a decision so we can move forth.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy never looked so good. I mean, so, he seems like the safest choice at this moment. We know Democrats can probably stomach him, but I don't even know if the vote happened today. We know it took him 15 rounds the last time to be elected. I'm not sure even if they went 15 or 20 rounds this time that he would be successful in securing the, speakership again. But I do wonder, Dr. Mitchell-Brown, how is this playing? Now, if you're not watching cable news, if you're not getting alerts on your phone every, 5 minutes from the New York Times, you may not even know this drama is playing out. Do you think the Democrats are doing a good job in terms of conveying this to the American people so that the American people will know these are not the people you want to vote for in 2024? This is not the party that you want to give control to because they're not capable of governing. They're not capable of coming together. They don't understand the concept of compromise. They don't know how to whip votes is something you have to be able to do in the House, like Nancy Pelosi, who was an expert at. Hakeem Jeffries is an expert at. So do you think this is translating on the ground to those voters who will be going to the polls next year?
Yeah, I don't think that they are maximizing the opportunity to shift the narrative, that the Democrats are not the problem here, right? And so we just can't leave it up for people to figure it out, on their own. Not to say that people are not intelligent, but connecting the dots to what's not happening. The opportunities that are just slipping away from elected officials, they are there to represent their constituency. They're there to represent us, not, this circus that continues to evolve. And this is all good evidence for how these folks govern in real time, and it should be used when we go to the polls.
But do you think, Professor Rahim, you teach African American history? I imagine you have lots of Black students in your classes, mixed students in your classes. I don't hear folks, shouting from the rooftops that the Democrats should be in control or that they're recognizing because of the inability of Republicans to govern that automatically they are going to vote for Democrats. So how do we get that to translate, this chaos to translate into something that's positive for Democratic voters?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Mitchell-Brown, right? The Democrats aren't using this moment to really point to the Republican Party as the party of chaos, as the party with issues, as the party that is holding up democracy and from people who have voted them in, who are relying on the government, on all levels of government to do their job, really going to using their pulpits, using their positions to point them out and to call them out. They're stalling government, not only on domestic issues, but a lot of the international and global issues that we see, particularly with the crisis going on with Israel and Gaza and Palestinians at this particular time. This is a time for a lot of us to speak up. You know, just in the classroom, we are just only so much of professors that we get to stand in front of our students and call them out and make sure they understand what's happening, and for them to, you know, hit the college campus and to hit their the local community that surrounds us and to go back to their homes and do something about it. But we're only a small part, and we're thankful for people like you who give us the opportunity to get on a larger platform and say we are talking about these issues in the classroom. We are talking about these issues within our local community. And it's now time for the people that we've elected on both sides of the aisle, who walk down the middle, to hold each other accountable and to do the job that you were elected for. And if that means we are all now pointing the fingers at the Republicans and the Republican Party and throwing them under the bus, then everyone should get rolled over that is standing on the side of the Republican Party in the way of us getting the job done.
And I'm glad you mentioned the business of not only domestic issues. Obviously, the budget for the United States, keeping our government open, is going to be on, coming up on the calendar pretty quickly. But also we have these geopolitical issues. We have Biden requesting over $100 billion in aid to go to the Ukraine to fight off Russians' invasion of the Ukraine, and this aid to go to Israel to respond to the attack by Hamas. Why do you think, Professor Mitchell-Brown, we're not seeing some of those Jewish leaders, some of those business leaders who've been coming down hard on students, who've issued statements in support of the Palestinians, issued statements that they believe are anti Jewish community? Why are some of those same leaders standing up, calling out these Republicans because the bill for the aid that Israel needs can't move forward in the House because there's no speaker to put the bill on the floor? I'm just sitting back. I'm looking every day in the paper at these poor students on college campuses who are being just fried by Jewish business owners and lawyers and executives. And that's fine. You know, I understand their frustration about some of these statements that have been made. Some of them I think are overblown, I think exaggerated. But I'm wondering, the real issue here is that money that the U.S., is pledged through Biden to give to Israel that's being held up. Maybe I missed it, but do you see the same kinds of jumping up and down about these grown ass men, let's call them that won't vote for a speaker, but attacks on 22 and 23-year-old students who are still developing? I'm getting frustrated just thinking about it, but maybe the two of you have seen them called out in a way that I haven't. Maybe I missed it. I'll give you that. So have you seen that, Professor Mitchell-Brown?
I have not seen it. I have not seen it anywhere, and it's such a mismatch. And the blame, right? First of all, we all send our condolences to the Palestinians and the Israelis and the loved ones who have been killed. No one condones terrorism, but right now terror is being inflicted by everyone. And it's really hard to, pick a side. There's suffering everywhere. But what I would say that there are opportunities for these grown-ass men to do something. And instead of holding them accountable, we are piling on. We are piling on these folks that are just trying to figure it out. And I say folks like young folks.
I need you to hold that thought for me, Professor Mitchell-Brown. When we come forward, I want to continue this conversation about how folks are responding in this moment and the repercussions that many people are facing as a result. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
We are back, and in this hour, I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Mitchell-Brown. She is a Senior Vice President at Race Forward, and Dr. Raja Rahim. She's a scholar and historian at Appalachian State. And I can't help but go back to this chaos in the GOP caucus, the assembly, the inability of these Republicans to select a speaker. And I'm looking at a tweet. Representative Rick Allen from Georgia, here's a Republican from Georgia, told Tom Emmer in a closed house GOP conference meeting that the Minnesota Republican, that's Tom Emmer, Minnesota Republican, didn't need to get right with him. He needed to get right with Jesus because Emmer supports gay marriage. And what makes that tweet so revealing is it shows all the fissures in the GOP caucus. Now, people talk about the Democratic Party being the big tent party. You have everyone from Democratic socialists like Senator Bernie Sanders to the blue dog Democrats that we see oftentimes in states like Missouri when we had, Senator McCaskill in Missouri. The Republican Party has been known traditionally as being kind of a single issue party, a party that would come together around a single issue like abortion, like protection of the borders, like support for the military. But it seems like the Republican Party may have as many fissures and factions as the Democratic Party, and it's all being revealed from those Republicans in New York who held the line last week and said no to Jim Jordan because they saw him as an obstructionist, as a legislative terrorist, as he's been called, to now these factions like this Republican from Georgia saying, Tom Emmer, you will never get my vote because you ain't, in his opinion, right with Jesus, because you support gay marriage. So when you think about all the issues that typically would bring Republicans together, it looks like those same issues are dividing them. And there may be no end in sight to this, which gets me back to the other issue about the $100 billion plus that Biden is asking to be appropriated by Congress for these two major wars that are happening, one in the Ukraine, obviously, and the other with Israel and Gaza. Dr. Rahim, what happens if our allies, if Israel, our ally, the Ukraine, can't get the funding that it needs to, fight in a way that it has deemed appropriate in these two wars because the American Congress cannot get its act together?
Yeah, what we'll see is, those two countries continuing to battle on their own until I guess they come to a ceasefire or willing to put down arms. We are really depending on our House, our Congress to get it together. And so we can see what actions will or will not be taken. But I think that when you're speaking to the decisiveness within the parties, it goes to show how many politicians, particularly whether we're talking about the Republicans or the Democrats, when it comes to the splits that are taking place and the multiple splits that exist within each party, is that they forget that they are no longer an individual with personal ideas and belief, that yet they represent a group, they represent a body, they represent a people who have voted for them, that at the end of the day, you get on with the majority and you get on with your party and you get on with the agenda that your party stands on at large. And I think that is exposing a lot of the issues when we are seeing within both parties that instead of coming together on what they do agree on and moving forward in action, they sit around bickering about all the things that they disagree on and using their personal beliefs and agendas and taking it into a place where you were representing, you was giving a different title to set your personal feelings and agendas and emotions aside to represent people and to represent your party and at large to represent the United States of America.
Yeah, clearly their individual beliefs, even when they are incongruent with what the majority of their constituents want, they continue to press forward. We see that happening in state houses, and obviously we see it happening in the Congress. Obviously, getting that money to Israel, getting that money to Ukraine is top of the mind for the Biden administration. But the Biden administration has also, Professor, made it very clear that they're concerned that Israel is not ready to have this ground attack that they said they are, preparing themselves for. And I think Biden must be whispering in the ear of Benjamin, the prime minister of Israel, because they said they were ready for this ground invasion, but it hasn't happened. And we know one of the things that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has stressed is the need for consideration of how the Israeli forces are going to conduct this ground invasion and what's going to happen. Who's going to govern? Because Hamas is not just a terrorist organization, it's also the governing body of Gaza. So if the Israelis are successful, which the U.S. military seems to be doubtful that it will be, in completely annihilating Hamas, the question becomes, who governs Gaza after that? What do you think happens? Is it your sense too that Israel is listening to Joe Biden? Because you're getting these anxious soldiers in Israel saying, we're ready, when are we going in? But seemingly something is holding them back.
Yeah, I would be the one to make it a venture that we're not talking about what needs to be talked about, in the sense of that for the first time, I think we are actually pulling back the veil on this conflict that has been taking over for decades, and that we are seeing, if they're not going to come out and rightfully say we're in the wrong or what's happening is not okay, that innocent lives are being lost, that how can we slow you all down? How can we slow this conflict and its aggression down? In many ways, what we're seeing is literally the destruction, not just of homes and communities and infrastructure, but the destruction of lives, families. And I think in many ways it is if I will call it a smoke screen, but is a way to give us to take a pause and to kind of really understand this conflict for what it is and what is really taking place. And if we allow this conflict, and particularly aiding Israel to actually move on the ground, what could possibly actually happen? And do we as the United States really want to be responsible and continue to play a hand in that conflict going over there? And I think it's something that we are tiptoeing around, that we're scared to speak out on because of our long stance in support of Israel. But I think now with the social media, with the videos, with the photos that are coming out, with the narrative that is being changed by many people from all sides, from all backgrounds, demographic, ethnic groups, racial groups, is giving us and giving Biden administration a mask to hide behind, but to also say, hey, let's have some backroom negotiations, Israel, so we can come to a better solution.
Yeah, no doubt, Dr. Mitchell-Brown, this is a complex matter for any president. Don't wish this on anyone, because you do have, as Dr. Rahim has said, you have this long-standing ally in Israel. They are our major ally in the Middle East. We have always supported, well, not always, but, dating back decades, we have supported them. We have vowed our unequivocal support for them to respond to this very heinous terrorist attack by Hamas that killed more people than have been killed since the Holocaust. Yet there is this issue, the UN calling for that is calling for Israel to follow the rules of war, saying just because you were attacked, you are not given unfettered power and ability to kill innocent civilians. But Israel is saying the Palestinian people, many of them are hiding and shielding Hamas, and that we're not intentionally shooting civilians, but we are going where Hamas is hiding. And unfortunately, Hamas is manipulating Palestinian people. They're hiding in communities. They're hiding in residential communities. They're hiding in hospitals. They're hiding in places where civilians are. And that, unlike Hamas, they are not targeting women and children. They are going after these vicious terrorists, but clearly in the process of doing so, over 5,000, according to Palestinian reports, over 5,000 people have already been killed. A great number of them are children. So it's a very difficult situation for the United States, and particularly our president. I think he's been doing a phenomenal job of threading this needle. And I do think there's some backdoor negotiations that are happening, because the Israeli prime minister said on day one they were planning this ground attack. We know the soldiers are ready. We've seen them, but yet this invasion hasn't happened.
Yeah, we are witnessing a humanitarian crisis in the region, and I'm very, very concerned about the continued shipment of aid to Israel, as well as the escalating loss of life. I mean, like you just said, the continued aid of military equipment would only add to the loss of life, and we are just watching entire communities being destroyed. This almost feels like a little bit of ethnic cleansing. And
but what do you say, Dr. Mitchell Brown, to those Jewish people here in the United States and Israelis that say, no, we're not targeting children and women, and this isn't a civilian cleansing. This is us rightfully defending ourselves and attacking Hamas that made this, unprovoked attack on Israel. Doesn't Israel have the right, as in the same way as the U.S. had the right, to go after the terrorists that attacked us on 9/11?
Yeah, there's this violence on all sides, right? And there are some big casualties. I mean, there's shutting off of water, shutting off of aids, and it's really attacking, humans. I mean, they're not getting to Hamas. And again, like I said, the suffering is everywhere. And we have to wonder if we are going to be on the right side of history when this all sort of settles down. And so, it would be great to see the ceasefire and the justice in. I don't know what it would take. So hopefully some of those backroom negotiations and discussions are moving us closer to there. But the casualties, there's innocent lives being lost on both sides.
There are. But the Jewish community in this moment is saying it is not fair to compare what they're doing, which is responding to this terrorist attack, to what Hamas has done, and its beheading, its raping, its murder of women and children, victims, completely innocent women, children, even soldiers. It's such a difficult crisis, obviously.
It's very, very difficult. And it almost forces us. Yeah, it almost forces us to be mute, right? Because if you say one thing and it's attack, well, what about this? And if you say, something else, well, then you're labeled as anti-Semitism. And so, or anti-Semitic. It's just very disturbing.
That's why I say leave these kids alone. And if Jewish leaders want to attack somebody, there's a very clear target. And those are those Republicans in the House that won't get their act together and pick a speaker so that the aid that has been pledged, whether we agree with the aid or not, it has been pledged by
the president, where it needs to be.
And it's should be voted on, yay or nay. It deserves to be voted on. And it's because of these do-nothing Republicans that aid is being held up at this moment. When we come forward, we got to talk about Donald Trump. Lots going on in Trump world. He came face-to-face with his former fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen, in a courthouse in New York. And that's happening while one of his former lawyers actually took a guilty plea in a case involving 18 other defendants. She is now the fourth person to plead guilty in the RICO charge that has been brought by Fonnie Willis in Georgia. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and his legal troubles when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a red spot,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to
Talk about the chickens coming home to roost. That's exactly what happened today in a New York courthouse when Michael Cohen, the one-time fixer and lawyer for Donald Trump, took the witness stand and accused his former boss of manipulating his net worth as Donald Trump stared blankly ahead. And this was the first interaction between these two men in 5 years. And the media is having a field day. It's almost as if there's a championship boxing match happening. Michael Cohen was supposed to testify a couple of days ago, and he said he was sick and couldn't come. Donald Trump, of course, said, oh, no, he's a chicken. He didn't want to show up in this courtroom and face me. And, then Michael Cohen had some response to that, and they've been going at it in the media. And finally today, that showdown happened. So Michael Cohen spilling the beans, and of course, Donald Trump going right outside that courtroom doors, going to the courtroom steps, telling reporters that Michael Cohen is a convicted felon, that he's a liar, that he's a loser, and that he's, making up stories on Donald Trump. How does this play out, Dr. Rahim? These two very powerful white men fighting, it's if it wasn't so serious about subverting our democracy, it really would be comical.
Yeah, it would be comical. I mean, in their actions, we can find some humor in that, right? To really see two men acting like children, going back and forth, bickering with each other, right? Honestly, but it's actually taking place out in the public and in the courtroom. It's sad, right? It's sad that we're still talking about Donald Trump. And, the fact that he is trying to call out his former lawyer as a felon when who's to say you're not going to be joining him with that title very soon? So I would be, very careful in the rhetoric I continue to spill if I was Donald Trump at this particular moment when it came to people who were once in your circle. But this is sad that it is taking place around people who were willing, and even Cohen in this place, who were willing to act against the principles of democracy, the principles of the United States, to act against, the people who ultimately entrusted you all to uphold, even if everyone in the United States didn't vote for you, they still entrusted you. You had a responsibility. And the fact that we're continuing to have these conversations, we're continuing to see the layers and the many layers of this particular onion unfold is very telling. We're ultimately sitting kind of like in a twilight zone. Is this the Matrix of some sort? Or are they, just building up these particular roles and hoping that one day Hollywood would give them the best movie deal ever? I think that's what some of these individuals are seeking to have, to go down in history as being these people who really just stood on the wrong side of justice and doing what was right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when you look at this, some of these people are literally right out of central casting. I don't think the best writers in Hollywood could have envisioned this plot twist that a man who runs for president, who refuses to turn over his tax returns, who tells the entire country that he's a billionaire 12 times over, now is sitting in a courtroom being accused of civil fraud. Judge already determined that he committed fraud. And now it's just a question of not if he will pay damages, but the question is really how much will he pay to the state of New York? And I asked a New York lawyer, Dr. Mitchell Brown, this ain't new stuff. You New Yorkers knew Donald Trump was engaged in this conduct. Why did it take so long for him to face any kind of accountability? And this isn't a criminal fraud case. This is a civil fraud case. It's really baffling to me that he got away with this for so long, even though it was happening in plain sight.
Yeah, it is baffling, and it is a reminder to us of the system that we live in that tells us who is important and who's a nobody, right? Donald Trump has had these problems even before he became president, and we said, not we as in you and I, but we as in the royal we said it doesn't matter, right? Because we have an agenda to push what we want, and that's not what the American people want. And we see that playing out, and they acted dangerously then. He's been acting dangerously. They've fallen down on the job in very critical moments, and they're not being held accountable. And so we have these systems, again, that's not built for everyone to be held accountable. And my hope is that, this changes, that this is a tide of things changing with, folks, being indicted on some of this corruption that really puts our democracy at risk. And so hopefully we will see more and more of Donald Trump being, tapped down and held accountable.
That would happen, but his team, his political team, says every time Donald Trump is indicted, every time something happens to him in a courtroom, they fundraise on it, and his polling numbers go up. So the judge in New York, one of his federal cases in New York, criminal cases, the judge issues a gag order. They fundraise on that. The judge temporarily suspends the gag order. They don't want it suspended. They want him to be gagged, because anytime a court imposes on him the standards that would be imposed on everyday people, they get to go out and tell the world that he's being politically persecuted, that he's being persecuted because he's winning, because, he's leading Joe Biden. So they want him to suffer. They probably want him to get convicted because they think he'll really win the presidency if he is a convicted felon. So all of the rules of the road that would apply to you and me and everybody else that we know don't apply to him, which is why 30 years later, after he's been defrauding the state of New York for decades, he's now finally being held accountable. And it's because of the strong attorney general that New York now has in Letitia James. And it's because of Fani Willis, Professor Rahim, that he is being held accountable in Georgia. And there are a lot of legal experts who faulted Fani Willis, who criticized her and said this RICO charge is too big, it's too sprawling, you indicted too many people. And I hope they now are eating crow. They should be, because she extracted 4 guilty pleas from the 19 co-defendants, and 3 of them are lawyers who were in the inner circle, who are going to now testify against Donald Trump. So kudos to Black women lawyers, Black women prosecutors around this country who are holding Donald Trump accountable and I think some of this is just jealousy of white male lawyers who are mad that they weren't able to do what these Black women are doing. But hats off to them for doing the job and holding our democracy. When you need something done, find a woman.
Ask a Black woman.
Done, find a Black woman. All right, you're out of time. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. In hour 2, we're talking about environmental justice and Cancer Alley in Louisiana. Make sure you stick around for hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time. Don't touch that dial.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva